she never meant for it to go that far. At least, that's what she told herself when the police car pulled up to the building. It was just a feeling, a gut reaction. She was alone, working late in the office tower downtown. When she heard footsteps echoing in the hallway and saw a man she didn't recognize, tall, black, wearing overalls and pushing a mop bucket, her mind raced. She dialed 911, her voice shaking, describing what she thought might be a break-in. Moments later, the janitor was surrounded by flashing lights and suspicion. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't have imagined that night, was how the man she feared would one day be the very reason she kept her freedom. This is a story about two strangers on opposite sides of a moment shaped by fear, assumptions, and the weight of history. He was just doing his job. She was acting on instinct. But that one call would unravel into something far deeper, revealing not only the truth about what happened that night, but about who they both really were. The janitor's name was Marcus. He'd worked in that building for 6 years, quietly and faithfully cleaning the same floors while lawyers, analysts, and executives passed him by without a second glance. But that night, he became something else in her eyes, a threat. And in a society already cracked by unspoken divides and hidden biases, that split-second judgment carried consequences. The woman, let's call her Claire, was a junior attorney, ambitious and careful. She'd just landed a spot at a high-profile law firm, trying to prove herself in a competitive world. When she called the police, she wasn't thinking about how it would look, or how it might affect the man she reported. She just wanted to feel safe. But what started as a misunderstanding spiraled quickly. Marcus was questioned, searched, humiliated in front of co-workers. Though no charges were filed, the damage lingered. Months passed. They didn't speak. They avoided each other in the building. But then something unexpected happened. Claire's name landed on a sensitive court case, a wrongful termination suit involving racial discrimination. And when the trial began, she needed a witness to verify a crucial piece of evidence, a conversation that took place late one night in the office. Only one person had been there. Only one person had seen what truly happened. Marcus. And now, she had to ask for his help. What would you do if the person who once called the cops on you came asking for a favor? Could you look past what they did and do the right thing, not for them, but for the truth? In this gripping true story, the courtroom became a place not just for justice, but redemption. And what Marcus did next would change everything, not just for Claire, but for himself. But before we get to that moment, you need to hear what happened that night. And why it matters more than ever. It was a rainy Tuesday night when it all began. The building was nearly empty, the city outside wrapped in a quiet drizzle. Claire had stayed late to prepare for an early morning deposition. She was buried in paperwork, headphones in, zoning out to instrumental piano when she noticed movement in the glass reflection behind her. Just a shadow, nothing alarming, but her body tensed anyway. She turned quickly and saw a man walking down the hallway with a mop in one hand and a spray bottle in the other. He didn't knock. He didn't speak. He was just doing what he did every night, cleaning the offices. But Claire's mind jumped. Maybe it was the late hour. Maybe it was the stress. Or maybe it was something deeper, something she didn't want to admit. All she saw was a man who didn't belong, at least not in her version of the moment. Her heart raced. She lowered her music. Her phone was already in her hand before she really thought it through. A few sentences spoken too fast. I don't feel safe, there's a man in the hallway. I don't know if he's supposed to be here. She hung up feeling like she did the responsible thing. The police arrived minutes later. Marcus stood still when they questioned him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't protest. He showed his ID badge, told them his supervisor's name, and explained that he had cleaned that same floor at the same time for years. The officers nodded, took down a few notes, and eventually left. But the damage was done. Everyone had seen it. The front desk clerk. The security guard. The other janitors. And worst of all, Marcus's teenage son, who worked the summer shift on another floor, heard about it from one of the guards before his shift ended. That night, Marcus didn't go home right away. He drove around the city for an hour. Rain tapped on the windshield as he tried to make sense of it all. It wasn't the first time someone looked at him like that. But somehow, this one cut deeper. Maybe because it happened in a place he trusted. A place where he'd been invisible for so long, until suddenly, he was seen, but only as a threat. The next morning, Claire walked into the office with that same nervous energy still coiled in her chest. But no one said anything. HR didn't call. No one pulled her aside. It was as if it had all been swept under the rug. She wanted to say something to Marcus, maybe explain herself, maybe apologize, but every time she passed him in the hallway, her mouth stayed shut. He didn't look at her. He didn't even slow his pace. It was like she didn't exist. But things were shifting. Quietly. Marcus had filed a formal complaint through his union rep, but the building's management kept it quiet. No action was taken. Meanwhile, Claire's firm had started assigning her to more sensitive civil rights cases, trying to build their reputation for diversity defense. Ironic, given what had just happened under their own roof. And then came the case, a racial discrimination suit from a terminated employee who claimed he was fired after reporting misconduct. Claire was handed the file as lead associate. She flipped through the documents and stopped cold when she saw a name listed as a potential witness. Marcus D. Holloway. Her hand froze on the page. She remembered the night. The hallway. The call. Now, she needed the one man she treated like a stranger, to stand by her in court. Claire stared at Marcus's name on the witness list like it didn't belong. Her throat tightened. Of all the people to be looped into this case, why him? It was almost cruel. Like fate had decided she hadn't learned her lesson the first time. She closed the file and leaned back in her chair, heart thudding. The room felt smaller now. She thought about removing his name, convincing the team he wasn't relevant. But she couldn't. The facts were clear. He was there. He heard what was said. He saw what happened. Without him, their case might fall apart. At the same time, Marcus was dealing with his own internal storm. When he got the call from the legal office about serving as a witness, he didn't say anything right away. He just listened. The woman on the line mentioned the firm, the date, the complaint. And then she said the name, Claire Whitmore. That name still tasted bitter in his mouth. He thought about saying no. He didn't owe her anything. She hadn't apologized. Hadn't even looked him in the eye since the night she called the police. But the truth was, Marcus had been trying to teach his son a lesson. That doing the right thing wasn't about who deserved it. It was about what was right, even when it was hard. And now that principle was staring him in the face. Claire, meanwhile, kept working like nothing was wrong, at least on the outside. But late at night, when the floor was quiet and the copier hummed like a distant warning, she kept playing out the scene in her head. She remembered Marcus's calm voice when the officers spoke to him. The way he kept his eyes down. How none of it surprised him. That haunted her more than anything, how normal it all felt to him. The case itself was complicated. The former employee, Darnell Briggs, claimed that a senior partner used racial slurs behind closed doors, and when Darnell reported it, he was quietly pushed out. Claire's firm denied the accusation, calling it a personality conflict, but there was one night when Darnell and the partner had a heated exchange in the hallway. And Marcus had been there. Cleaning. Again. This wasn't just about testimony. This was about credibility. Marcus wasn't just a janitor anymore, he was the witness that could tip the scales. And Claire knew it. Her bosses started pressing. Make sure he's on board, they told her. Whatever it takes. She nodded, but inside, she felt trapped. Meanwhile, Marcus wrestled with the weight of it all. His son, Jamal, found out what was going on and didn't hold back. "You're really gonna help the woman who treated you like a criminal?" he asked one night after dinner. Marcus didn't respond right away. He stared at the chipped edge of the dinner table, then said quietly, "I'm not doing it for her." But even he wasn't sure who he was doing it for. The day Claire reached out, really reached out, was awkward. She caught him near the supply closet, just after hours. Her voice was quiet, hesitant. "Marcus, can we talk?" He didn't stop moving. Just kept pushing his cart. "Please," she said. He paused then, barely. But didn't turn. That hallway felt colder than usual. The building was silent, but everything between them was loud, the past, the mistrust, the invisible weight of assumptions. And as the court date drew closer, so did the pressure. Claire's career was on the line. Marcus's values were being tested. And neither of them was ready for what the trial would reveal. The days leading up to the trial felt like they were carved out of glass, fragile, cold, and ready to shatter. Claire barely slept. She rehearsed her statements, revised her notes, then re-revised them. But none of it settled the anxiety pressing on her chest. The closer the courtroom loomed, the louder her guilt became. She hadn't told anyone the full story about Marcus. Not her team, not her boss, not even the firm's diversity advisor who kept throwing around phrases like inclusive optics and narrative control. All they knew was that Marcus was a reliable witness. Only Claire knew what she'd done to him. Marcus, on the other hand, had started having dreams. Strange, vivid ones where he was back in the hallway, only this time the walls kept closing in. Sometimes the floor turned to glass and he could see everyone watching from below, Claire, the cops, his son. Other nights, he was alone in the courtroom, sitting in the witness chair, but no one was asking him anything. Just silence. Just stares. He didn't talk about it, but the weight in his shoulders got heavier each morning. Jamal noticed. "You don't have to do this, Dad," he said again, more softly this time. Marcus nodded but didn't respond. It wasn't that simple. It never had been. Then came the subpoena. It was official now. Marcus would testify. Claire was the one who requested it. Not personally, she sent the assistant to file it, but the order carried her name. When Marcus opened the envelope, he stood by the window for a long time, holding it in one hand like it might burn through. The courthouse address. The time. The case number. Her name. His. The trial began under a gray sky. Inside the courtroom, the air felt tense. Reporters lingered in the hallway, whispering about the firm's reputation, about the racial discrimination claims, about who might take the stand. The judge looked stern, the jury quiet. Darnell Briggs sat at the front, shoulders stiff, eyes scanning the room. The senior partner he'd accused sat just feet away, flanked by polished lawyers and cold confidence. Claire sat at her table, pen in hand, back straight, pretending she wasn't unraveling inside. She hadn't seen Marcus yet. She didn't even know if he'd show. And then, just before the lunch break, she looked up and saw him. Marcus walked in quietly, dressed in a plain navy suit that didn't quite fit right. He sat in the back, alone. No expression. No nod. Just presence. The room didn't shift. But Claire did. Her next task was simple: call him to the stand. But her fingers trembled as she lifted the paper. Marcus sat up straighter when his name was called. He walked with slow, even steps past the rows of seats and into the center of the room. Claire's heart pounded. She couldn't look at him directly, but she could feel the heat of that night, the memory, the mistake, hanging between them like smoke. He raised his right hand. Swore to tell the truth. Then silence. Everyone waited. Cameras blinked. Pens hovered. And Claire opened her mouth to ask the first question, unsure if he'd even answer. Because what Marcus said next had the power to destroy careers, shift blame, expose the cracks in the system, or give someone their justice. And in that moment, every word mattered. Marcus looked out across the courtroom, his eyes landing on Claire just for a second. Then he looked away. Claire felt her stomach drop. She was trained for this, trained to cross-examine hostile witnesses, to dismantle lies, to stay composed under pressure, but this wasn't a stranger on the stand. This was the man she had once reduced to a suspect. And now, he held the truth. She cleared her throat. "Mr. Holloway, can you tell us what you witnessed on the evening of March 18th? Marcus shifted in the chair. "Yes," he said calmly. "I was mopping the hallway outside conference room 3B. I heard raised voices. I looked up and saw Mr. Langford," he nodded toward the senior partner, speaking to Darnell Briggs. "And what did you hear?" Claire asked, pen poised, waiting for the moment they practiced in strategy meetings. But Marcus paused. The courtroom leaned in. He looked straight at the jury. "I heard Mr. Langford call Darnell. Boy. He told him he should be lucky to even have a job at this firm." A quiet gasp moved through the crowd. Claire blinked. But then Marcus kept going. "He said a man like him shouldn't expect to rise too high. That he should know his place." Claire's fingers tightened around the pen. That wasn't in the notes. That wasn't in any of the statements. That was worse, much worse, than what she'd prepared for. And it was real. She looked to her lead partner sitting beside her. His face was stone cold, but she could feel the heat radiating from his stare. They hadn't authorized this testimony. They had wanted Marcus to support a narrow version of events, just enough to dismiss the claim as unprofessional language, not something more sinister. Something they could spin. But now, it wasn't just workplace conflict. It was something far deeper. Racial prejudice. Power abuse. And it had been witnessed, under oath, in front of the press. The judge leaned forward. "Please continue, Mr. Holloway." Marcus nodded, voice steady. Darnell looked shocked. Hurt. "I remember the way he backed away like someone had slapped him. I didn't say anything at the time. I just watched. I knew it wouldn't matter if I did." Claire's throat tightened. This wasn't just testimony, it was a mirror. Every word Marcus spoke made her feel the full weight of that night, of what she had done. But then came the twist. When cross-examined by the defense, Marcus revealed something no one saw coming. "That night," he said, answering a question about his routine, "it was the same night Ms. Whitmore called the police on me." Now the courtroom truly froze. He turned his head. "The same woman questioning me now." The jury's eyes darted. Claire's face flushed. "After I was stopped, questioned, and let go. I went right back to work," Marcus said quietly. "And that's when I saw Mr. Langford talking to Darnell. If I hadn't been delayed in that hallway, I might have missed it completely." There it was. A second twist. The call that nearly ruined Marcus's life had accidentally placed him in the exact spot he needed to be to witness the truth. Without that call, there would have been no witness. No case. And now, that single moment, the one Claire wished she could erase, was the only thing keeping her firm from getting away with everything. The courtroom was silent. Every person, jury, judge, press, sat in that stillness, absorbing what Marcus had just said. Claire felt the air leave her lungs. The irony of it all gripped her hard. Her one moment of fear, the call she regretted more than anything, had led Marcus to the truth. A call made out of panic had become the only reason justice was even possible. The judge leaned slightly forward. "Is that your full testimony, Mr. Holloway?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Yes, Your Honor." The defense scrambled. They tried to discredit him, asked about his work history, his memory, his so-called bias. But Marcus never wavered. He didn't get angry. He didn't speak more than needed. He just held his ground, honest and steady. When it came time for closing arguments, Claire stood, hands slightly shaking but face composed. She didn't just repeat legal points. This time, her voice had something else behind it: weight, experience, regret. She looked at the jury and told them this case wasn't only about policy or performance reviews. It was about power. About what happens when someone speaks out, and no one listens, unless someone unexpected is standing behind them. And then she said it, plain and clear. If Marcus Holloway hadn't been there that night, if he hadn't been wrongly suspected, wrongly reported, none of this would have come to light. That moment we often want to forget. That moment is the reason we're all here now. The verdict didn't take long. The jury ruled in favor of Darnell Briggs. The firm was ordered to pay damages and issue a public apology. Mr. Langford was suspended pending further investigation. And just like that, the giant firm Claire had once fought so hard to impress was now under national scrutiny. But that wasn't the end. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Darnell stood tall, grateful but drained. Claire watched from the side, not stepping forward. She didn't expect praise. She knew she didn't deserve it. Then she saw Marcus. He was standing off to the side, watching everything unfold. She walked up slowly, unsure of what to say. "Thank you," she finally said, voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't have to do what you did." He looked at her. Calm, quiet. "No," he replied. "But someone had to." She nodded, but didn't move. Then he added something she didn't expect. "You know, when they asked me to testify, I didn't say yes for a long time. But it wasn't because of what happened between us. It was because I didn't think anyone would believe me. I've seen how stories like this go. But your reaction today, what you said in court, it made me think maybe things can change." Claire blinked. It was the first time she felt like maybe she hadn't just tried to fix the past, maybe she'd actually learned from it. They stood in silence for a moment. And just as Claire turned to leave, Marcus called out. "By the way, I never held it against you. Fear makes people do strange things. But what you do after, that's what counts." She didn't say anything. Just nodded. And for the first time in months, she walked away feeling something close to peace. But in a final twist, days later, Marcus received an offer, an invitation from the city's Department of Civil Rights to join their Community Oversight Board. His voice, once overlooked, now had a seat at the table. And it all began with a night when someone tried to silence it. The weeks that followed were quiet but full of change. The media storm faded, the law firm issued a carefully worded apology, and Darnell moved on to a new position at a nonprofit legal aid center, somewhere he said he felt respected, finally. Claire stayed at the firm for a little while longer, but something inside her had shifted. Every hallway reminded her of what she'd learned. Every late night at the office made her think twice about the people she used to overlook. She started using her voice differently. No more playing it safe. She challenged things in meetings she would have once let slide. She volunteered pro bono for racial justice cases. And though the guilt never fully disappeared, it became something else, something useful. A reminder that silence protects no one, and that accountability starts with you. As for Marcus, the city's invitation changed his life more than he expected. He took the role on the community oversight board and sat in rooms with people who, until then, had only seen him in the background. Now, his voice shaped policy. His words were written into citywide training materials for law enforcement and corporate HR departments. And when he spoke, people listened, not because he raised his voice, but because the truth always carried weight when it came from him. Jamal watched all of it. He saw his father's quiet strength become something powerful. They started attending community town halls together. Once, after one meeting, Jamal said, "I didn't get it before. But now I do. You stood up because someone had to. Even if no one clapped for it." Marcus smiled, the same quiet way he always had. It's not about the claps. It's about not letting the wrong things win. Claire and Marcus crossed paths one last time, months later, at a city event on workplace equality. It wasn't dramatic, no long conversation or big apology. But something passed between them. A look. A mutual understanding. That life had given them both a hard lesson, and somehow, they had grown from it. And maybe that's what this story was really about. Not just about a janitor wrongfully judged. Not just about a young attorney forced to face her own bias. But about what happens when we stop defending the comfortable version of ourselves, and instead, face the truth. One moment of fear had nearly erased a man's dignity. But that same moment, twisted, painful, opened the door to justice, to second chances, to voices finally being heard. Stories like this remind us that the people we overlook are often the ones holding everything together. That doing the right thing doesn't always come with recognition. And that real change starts with small, uncomfortable choices, like owning a mistake, speaking out, or choosing to stand up even when it's easier to walk away. So, next time you pass someone without thinking, remember Marcus. Remember that everyone's story runs deeper than what's seen. And sometimes, the person you least expect could be the reason everything